Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We have fantastic guests for our panel about global and local, what is optimistic and where we have to be very careful. We have, of course, still Francis Fukuyama with us. Big round of applause, absolutely. Kasia, Kieli, President and Managing Director of Warner Bros. Discovery Poland and CEO of TVN. Aleksander, Kutela, CEO of Ringier, Axel, Springer Polska. Hello, Alex. Michał, Gajewski, CEO of Santander Bank Polska. And Tomasz, Blicharski, EVP and Managing Director of Żabka Group. First question to Francis Fukuyama. Sir, I was very lucky to be able to talk to you 25 years ago in Warsaw. At that time, it was amazing to meet an American in Warsaw. That meant really a lot at that time. And the world was beautiful. That was before September 11. Everything was fantastic. And we were so optimistic at that time that liberal democracy will win everywhere and we'll be living in peace permanently, forever. To be honest, now it's quite easy to be pessimistic. And I would like to change the dynamic. In 1993, the command of Russian army communication was located in Poznan, almost right here where we are right now. There were thousands of Russian troops in Poland at the beginning of the 90s. A decade ago, a decade before that, Brezhnev was so much stronger than Putin is now. The world was really on the verge of extinction in 1962 during Cuban Missile Crisis. Of course, we didn't expect such a horrible bloody war as the war that is going on right next to our border in Ukraine. It is true. But I think there are many reasons to be optimistic. Of course, we do have a lot of problems. But in general, maybe we should be more optimistic. In your opinion, where should we be very careful thinking about the future? And why maybe we are overreacting? We are really in much worse shape 30 years ago.
Well, I think if you look at the official statistics, the GDP of the European Union is several times the size of Russian GDP. The potential military might of Europe is much, much greater than that of Russia. The problem is simply internal politics, the unwillingness of publics in Europe and in the United States to actually spend enough money and to prepare themselves for what's going to be, I think, an extended conflict. You haven't mentioned China, which is, you know, I think one of the more troubling things that's happened in the last few years. You used to have an axis involving China, Russia, Venezuela, so forth. Now it's an actual alliance where they're actively helping one another. And so Russia now has friends in a way that it didn't have. But even given that, I think the might of the US and Europe combined is still much greater. The real problem, I think, is the internal rise of divisions. The single thing that weakens the United States the most is its internal polarization, where Americans can't even agree what side they're on, you know, in terms of the Ukraine war. And until that's solved, I don't see that we're going to exert the kind of power and influence that we ought to be exerting. Which is why I personally am now much more focused on the United States, because I think unless we fix that problem, you know, we're not going to correct this shift towards authoritarian government that we've seen all over the world.
You were talking just before our panel a lot about the situation of the Democratic Party, because if you would be listening only to European media, you would have the perception that the power of Donald Trump is on the verge of collapse. I think it doesn't look like that if you are in the US, and the support for Democratic Party is on the level of 27%, which is the lowest since 1990. So what's the future of the US? Do you think, is there any dynamic to change the reasons why Trump won the elections?
Oh, there's absolutely a possibility of changing the narrative completely. Trump's economic policies make no sense. You know, I don't see a single economist that thinks that the kinds of tariffs that he's announced and the inconsistency with which he's pursued these policies is going to help anybody, including the United States. It's going to hurt American consumers first and foremost, and I think that that by itself is going to be a major problem that he is going to have to deal with. And so I think in that respect, you know, he's setting the ground for his own, you know, undermining his own position.
Michał Gajewski, CEO of Santander Bank Polska. We have a saying in Poland, I don't know if it's an international saying, that the God is laughing when people make plans. I do believe that the God was never laughing so hard as nowadays, because it's really hard to make a plan. And I do understand that in a bank, you have to foresee the future in a way. In a television business, we can react immediately, and it is a good television, live television, when something is changing. But how you can make a plan in a bank for your operations in Poland when there are so many different factors globally, tariffs, Greenland, China, peace negotiation in Turkey these days. How to operate in such a world?
Thank you for this question. Yeah, really, this is a very complex world and not easy to manage bank. But let me start with a topic that consumes a lot of my time, and I believe very rightly so. This is about regulations, because regulations and the whole framework that we have after the great financial crisis, in fact, supports us, even if we complain from time to time that our industry is over-regulated. So this great financial system reveals a lot of flaws and weaknesses in our frameworks, risk frameworks, but also operating models. And therefore, regulators decided to impose on us really very rigid scheme of the regulations, starting from Basel 1, 2, 3, 4, ours, Sarbanes-Oxley, bank recovery and resolution. So we can complain for this, but it also gave us really a lot of support how we should frame our business. And of course, our business is also very much about trust and reputation. So we have to be really prepared to build and to rethink the core. And I believe that both regulators and ourselves, we did it. We set up procedures, processes, also in terms of the anticipation of the crisis like COVID or war in Ukraine. And also, I believe that it's extremely important to show the leadership during those times and really walk the talk, all right? Because if, for example, we say that we are here to help customers and our people, businesses, to prosper, and we are here to help achieve more. We have to behave and serve our customers in such a way. Without preparation, without a proper anticipation of the even black swans, it wouldn't happen.
A question to Tomek, but I have to make a short introduction. What is Żabka? Because for our guests from abroad, Żabka in Poland is something like Starbucks in the US, like in San Francisco. You don't have to ask where is Starbucks, you just walk and open the door, and it works like that in Poland. And someone many years ago tried to explain to me what is the difference between the power of economy, the United Kingdom and Poland. Let's imagine that there is a time difference. If the stock exchange in London would collapse, someone would definitely wake up the president of the National Bank of Poland. If stock exchange in Warsaw would collapse, the president of the National Bank of the United Kingdom would read about it in the morning newspaper. It's not such a big deal. How often it happens that someone has to wake you up in Poland, being a leader of Żabka group in our country, that something globally happened. Wake up, Tomek. Trump said something about Greenland. Wake up, there is a problem with beef from Argentina. Or wake up, there is a problem with soya production in Louisiana. How you can manage global and local?
Yeah, it's a great question. And unfortunately, I tend to wake up by myself when I get my phone to wake me up with a ping from one of the social media or whichever media networks. But I think we as senior Żabka team, we've joined the company roughly 10 years ago when it was 20 times smaller than it is right now, right? So it's been 10 years of a big growth. And many people ask why we were able to achieve what we have achieved over this 10 period of time. And I think the key to answer that question is leadership. The leadership, and specifically leadership by design, which we try to employ at Żabka, brought us where we are today. We decided to rebuild the company from scratch. It was a company that already existed for 15 years before. We tried to rebuild it from scratch, including redesigning the values, the corporate culture, creating the alignment of interest, and the flywheel of success between us and the franchisees and the customers. And effectively, all these ingredients together, supported also by modern technology that we employ in all aspects of the business. We had AI before it was kind of fancy to say AI, brought us to the fact that whatever the shock it is, if it's global, coming from any country, or local, because we had many shocks, coming from locally, sudden change of regulations that happened quite a few times over this period of time. We are able to react, but not only us, but also our people, change direction from one day to the other. And from that perspective, in terms of the food production, Poland is quite isolated, in fact. We have very short supply chains in Poland in terms of food production. We're net producer of food in many aspects. We have plenty of manufacturing capabilities in Poland. So in fact, that is not the biggest one. What I can tell you, given that we live from people on the street, is when COVID happened from one day to the other, where everything became closed and our stores became effectively empty from one day to the other, especially in our key categories such as hot dogs. We sell more than 80 million hot dogs per year in Poland. So a statistical Pole eats more than 2 hot dogs per year with us. Suddenly, from one day to the other, the sales dropped by 90%, right? And we had a kind of emergency team, how to kind of revive it, because we're not going to survive if people are not in the stores. And we use technology at the time. We use our app. We brought in kind of very sophisticated ways of attracting people, and we managed to rebound quite quickly. But it is the leadership by design and the way we structure organization, how we motivate the people, how we align everyone, that in fact worked successfully for us.
Kasiu, I'm absolutely sure that statistically, Poles are eating these 2 hot dogs, watching our productions on television screen, right, or on a mobile. And Warner Bros. Discovered it is one of the most global brands on our planet. But how you can manage it? Because, of course, we are similar to each other on our planet, and we are at the same time different, and we like the way we are different in our separate countries. So how is it possible to manage on such a global scale and to offer something valid, important, trustworthy, when you are a part of such a global network and you are responsible for Poland as well?
Well, first, maybe I'll comment on the facts. Yes, facts are definitely on our side, because if anything happens in Poland, people watch TVN24 and people watch TVN. And, most recently with the election of the new Pope, we were like a #1 network in Poland. So I have to say that because it's really, really impressive. I would say that, global companies, they're different global companies. There are global companies that are built on one product, and they really try to extend that product into as many territories and in as many countries as possible. And there are companies like us. We are an entertainment company. Entertainment and news, and by design, that needs to speak to local audiences and local communities. And by design, the trust, specifically on the news side, is built by being close to the local communities, and by being close to the market you operate in, there wouldn't be trust, the amount of trust that we have for TVN24, if TVN24 was not reflecting what's going on in Poland and not managing that on its own. So companies of that nature, as WBD, need to operate differently. We operate on a set values which are common to us, which is a belief in independent media, in independent journalism, in freedom of speech, and then allowing us to tell our own stories. At heart, we are storytellers. We love to tell stories because by stories, people develop, we develop ideas, and also being a part of the global organization, I wanted to talk because that's important, allows us here in Poland to tell our local stories to global audiences. And the best example, maybe some of you had an opportunity to see our series, The Eastern Gate, which talks about, the challenges on our eastern border. Very, very modern challenges. It's an espionage story. It's a great series. If you haven't seen it, go and see it on Max platform. And actually, this story we took around the world. And it was one of the most watched, if not the first, the second most watched series around the globe for us. And we showcased what's going on in this region. We build bridges, and we show what's going on.
Aleksander, you know that CNN is our sister network at Warner Bros. Discovery. And I remember the day 30 years ago, or even more than that, when I was watching CNN for the very first time, during the Gulf War, the first Gulf War. And it was amazing to imagine that billions of people around the planet can watch the same video source. So we did have the same version of what's going on in the world. But now we are living in a completely different world where we have global information, but we have global disinformation as well. Yesterday, it was publicly announced that a foreign player was trying to influence the outcome of the presidential election in Poland. And you're the leader of a huge media group. How you can operate in such a world? And how much responsibility do you feel, a burden on your shoulders, being responsible for what people will know, and that will decide their future?
So maybe I start with a bit of the background, that when we look in the past, we can observe that whenever the mode of the mass communication has changed, the way how the power is gained, who gain the power is changing as well. So when the Gutenberg invented print, it's actually start to cause some speed of information, which leads to the Reformation. When in 19th century press start to be true mass medium, it triggered the spring of nations and in the end the born of the modern democracy. When the new media appeared, like television and radio, emotions and images comes to place, but also we truly leverage media to the truly mass media. But now when we have a social media, it's really, in a way, disturb the whole system, because the fundamental rule of the media that freedom implies responsibility is not respected. And this really causes all the consequences when we look at that. Because we have now, as you said, more disinformation, fake news, manipulation, and this really triggered the results of the elections. And we could just name a few recent examples, Brexit, or even in Romania just recently. And we all think that still mass media like us, like TVN, shape the opinions. But the truth is that nowadays in many Western European countries, it's actually social media is the first source of information, but without real responsibility for what is distributed. So what we can do, how we can react, coming back to your question. Well, first of all, we have to stay reliable, trusted source of information. But at the same time, we have to transform to use modern formats, modern language, to be more engaging, especially for the younger audience. That's number one. Number two, whether we like it or not, we have to be wherever our audience is. So if they don't come to our media, we have to be with our content also in social media to counterbalance this information. But finally, and I think this is the most important, that we need to influence and even demand from the decision makers, from the governments, that they really execute from the social media the accountability for the content they distribute. Because without this, we will not resolve the main problem. And if we don't react properly, we really end up with something which is kind of a digital middle age. It even has its name. It's a techno-feudalism, when a few big tech companies, in fact, can control the power, the wealth. They set the rules of the whole ecosystem. And the rest of us, not only ordinary people, but also companies, start to really behave like digital servants. We just pay the fee, but can really not control anymore its destination and the future. So this is not against any particular company. It's just a strong request that we have to create boundaries, a framework, a rules of the system. Otherwise, the system starts to collapse as we see today.
One last question to all of you. As leaders of huge organizations, global and local at the same time, what principle, what mindset, what lesson you have to keep in mind being an effective leader in such a turbulent time? Tomek.
Well, it's quite simple for us. In 2 words, it's growth mindset. So the effectively, I learn it all type of attitude. The times changes, tools change, everything changes from one day to the other. So the only thing to stay ahead of it is this attitude that I learn throughout every day, every single moment, through the challenges, through feedback, through what I've done. And we at Żabka, we try to employ that. And I think that's part of the secret sauce of success.
Michał Gajewski.
I believe adaptation and agility, these are the crucial leadership capabilities. And as a leader, I am also a believer in a full accountability. No excuses, not blaming others or external circumstances, own the problem, deliver the solution, and we call it total ownership. And I believe, and also I agree with my colleague, that the growth mindset is also something which is extremely important in our organization.
Aleksander.
I would say for us, the most important is building culture open for change, which is open to embracing change. Because nowadays technology is very important, but the best technology doesn't really work if our people doesn't want to implement it, if they don't want to change. So the culture open for change.
Kasia.
I think that from a leadership perspective, the most important thing at the moment is to show the direction of the journey. And I'm talking about the direction of the journey because we don't know how that journey is going to go. And then create a sense of belonging for the people, create a sense of being in it, and create a space because that's where, being comfortable with what's uncomfortable is key. And it's about the change. It's about being agile. It's about being able to say, okay, maybe my priority yesterday was this, but today is something else, and that's good. And for the leaders today, I think that one of the most important things is presence, because when there's so much unknown, there's so much uncomfortable situation, gray situation where I don't know what to do, presence is key. To be there, to be for the people, to be adaptable, and to listen.
Francis Fukuyama, you're not a leader of a business organization, so I would like to phrase that question in a different way, but I want to quote one of the advisors of President Trump during his first administration, and he came to the office on the morning, on Monday, and he gave to all of his employees 72 different tweets of President Trump, and he ordered them, okay, and now write a law about it. And they were going into all possible different directions. So what would be your advice for leaders nowadays? Follow every news about the American administration, or keep calm, because you really don't know what's going to happen?
Well, I think obviously keeping calm is always good advice, no matter who's president of the United States. But in particular, this president produces so much noise that, you know, and I think the problem is that in that noise there's some signal. And it's very hard to figure out what's the noise and what's the signal. But when the signal comes, it's really important because he actually is going to make decisions that will affect everybody. So, you know, you need somebody that actually can distinguish between the two and focus on what actually is going to result in some really big actions. Because unfortunately, you know, the United States is this 800-pound gorilla, and when it actually moves, it's going to affect a lot of different people.
Sir, one last question to you. It's totally off the script. But I would like to use your presence here because something really unimaginable happens. I used to be a correspondent in Washington, but before I was a correspondent in Vatican. What was your reaction when you have heard that an American became a pope? And how does that change the dynamics in the world and maybe in the US? Because for the United States, this is an amazing situation. In a way, I think cardinals have saved the United States because now, for the world, the US is somewhere between Trump and Leon XIV, and that makes a difference.
Well, I think that it was less the selection of an American cardinal, but rather the selection of Leo that was important because he seems to be following in Francis's footsteps. And that's a really important signal, whatever the nationality of the Pope, that you are going to get somebody that is going to be an advocate for the poor, for the marginalized, and that's going to hold up a mirror to power that, you know, will hopefully act as some degree of restraint. I think that was really what was, to me, the most significant thing about that choice.
I think that would be the official statement of the Vatican. But for you as an American, he is an American. And really, when I was there in the Vatican many years ago, I was covering a lot of different conclaves. No one would ever expect an American citizen being a pope, because people used to think Americans have too much power anyway. You cannot imagine an American being the leader of the United Nations. And now, in a way, he's really one of the most powerful people on the planet when it comes to the message. He may use this power, he may not, but it makes a difference.
Well, he's an unusual American. You know, half of Americans don't have a passport. They never go outside the United States. This is a man who has actually served in a ministry in poor countries for a very large part of his life. And that's a very unusual kind of American. So I think that his identity as an American is only part of who he is. You know, he's truly much more international in that sense. And I think that's exactly what the world needs at this present moment.
Thank you so much. Great pleasure. Francis Fukuyama, Kasia Kieli, Aleksander Kutela, Michał Gajewski, Tomasz Blicharski. Thank you so much.